Welcome to the Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon.
I'm Stuart.
We're both property people running our own businesses. This podcast is just us chatting, as we often do, about anything and everything property. And we are recording towards the end of April after several weeks of lockdown and still looking at a few more weeks probably to come. And we thought we'd do a bit of an update episode, just letting people know what's going on in our businesses, Stuart. So do you want to go first and let us know what's been changing for you?
Well, I think a lot's changed since our last update, because in our last update, I think I was talking about remortgages, completing refurbs, and understandably they have all, well, some understandably, some not, but have come to a halt. So the remortgages were placed on hold because the banks, Kent Reliance, said that they are prioritising all of the mortgage holidays that people are requesting. So totally get it. But the remortgages were fairly straightforward, but they've gone on hold with them, and not just Kent Reliance had another. So on the refurb that we're doing, we were refinancing out of a bridging loan onto a buy-to-let, and they refunded me the valuation on that because they're not going to conduct the valuation, and that's now ground to a halt. Does that mean
they're not? So they've said they're not going to do a valuation at all, as in not even a desktop valuation. You say it's ground to a halt, as in have they actually said they're not going to progress with it at all, or are they just
they've pulled. Yeah, they've pulled it. Yeah, so on the refurb refi, so it's a different bank to who we've got the bridging loan with. They've just said we are no longer lending. Now, funny enough, I have got an email this morning to say that might be changing, but that's so precise mortgages. They kind of just completely pulled out of the market. Land Bay said that they were pausing everything. I think what I'm hearing is that's starting to change, but as you said on the intro, we're looking at weeks of lockdown, and from what I hear, I think not being pessimistic but being realistic, we're probably looking at months of a form of lockdown. It's just what can we do? The valuations, right. I managed to get valuation just in at the end, but then that's been for another property, for a third property, and that's kind of been put on hold by the bank itself. And the works itself has stopped, understandably. The building team have to look after themselves, but he was saying he could go in, but I don't think he can at the moment anyway. But now all of the supplies have dried up, so I guess you could say it's negative, but in my world, I kind of just accept things for what they are. Fortunately, sometimes you have a little paddy, but this is the world we're living in, the COVID world. So so lots changed in the last couple of weeks, actually. But I'm feeling quite positive about it and using the time to plan. But how about you at the moment?
Well, just before I do my bit, previously you had builders who were still doing some building work, but just socially distanced, but now you say they've stopped entirely. And I think I've heard some larger builders are now getting back to site. Now they've worked out their sort of health and safety concerns and changed processes. But you're working with a smaller builder, yes, and they've gone the other way.
Well, they've gone the other way because they fell ill. So it was a small building team of 3 or 4 people, but 2 or 3 of them became ill. And obviously the others decided to stay home, isolate as well, which is absolutely the right thing to do. And
of course,
been very clear with all of the team, that health obviously comes first, and clearly we've got guidance, and we're not in Southern America, so we'll pretty much subscribe to the rules we're given and not protest on the streets. But so that's why that stopped. I mean, the lead.
That's fair enough. That's a rather different and sort of specific case, isn't it? So
The lead builder's doing what he can. So a couple of bits have been done. I think we're nearly there. I mean, it's it's the frustration is we're probably 95% of the way done. And actually, the second point you just talked about in terms of valuation. So we had been told that we could get a desktop valuation. But again, in the back of my mind, I knew that would be quite optimistic because, if you think we bought a property for 230,000 6 or 7 months ago, and you're asking for a valuation that's over 100k higher than that, it's going to be very hard to get a desktop valuation unless the identical property has sold for the price you're valuing at within a very short period of time. So quite naturally, they said they need to do an internal valuation because they they haven't said this, but they obviously want to understand that, what we've said has happened. We planned for that. So we've got photos and everything else, but it is what it is.
I wonder if you could find someone who would do a sort of video survey, that kind of approach. So currently you're stuck on a bridge. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I say stuck on a bridge. We fully intended to stay on the bridge until we sold the property, but obviously that was pre-COVID. And the bridge itself, obviously, if anyone's got a residential mortgage or a buy-to-let mortgage, as soon as I say it's over 7% a year, then you're going to swallow very hard. But actually, as a bridge, it's and in fact, I think let's say it's gone down. I think it's like 0.5 something a month, which is really, really good for a bridge.
That is good, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, quite often you sort of assume a bridge is going to be around the 1% a month mark. So
yeah, and the challenge for us, why we were happy to stay on it, because again, just to explain the rationale, is that yes, we're on a bridge, and yes, you're paying more per month, but once you sell the property, you're just exiting the bridge, and all of the fees have been rolled into the bridging finance. However, as we intend to now, once we go into another product, so once we go into a buy-to-let product, obviously we've got more fees to get that product. Most of them will have early redemption charges, our wonderful ERCs. Yeah. We might find a product without ERCs, but then you're going to pay more for that. And equally, you're still going to pay fees around it. So all of this erodes the profit margin, which is why typically we would have just stayed on the bridge. But as is ever the case, you work in the environment you've got, and so we're looking for the buy-to-let. So is on my list of things to do today is to follow up and see what other options there are for us to get out, because again, cash flow is a challenge at the moment, and that's why I was just thinking about where you're at with your sort of client base, because I know my cash flow's up against it at the moment. So I was just interested to hear about yours.
Yeah. So if we're looking at sort of the other side of the equation, the tenant side, so far I haven't had any unpaid rent. I have had some delayed rent. So I have, let's go through a few of them. So there's the last I heard from one tenant was that they weren't working, but they were in a full-time job before, and their employer hasn't actually worked out what they're going to do with them yet. So they're in a bit of limbo still, which is unfortunate. But they said they're okay for April's rent, and indeed they paid that. So we'll have to see what happens for May. But I've got another tenant who has been furloughed, and they're definitely at home not working. And then two other tenants who are both working but on reduced hours and reduced pay. And one of those has said that because of that they were struggling to pay the rent on time, so they asked to split the rent, pay most of it when it was due, and then they caught up with the remaining element the following week. But of course, that's presumably then going to have been eating into what they would have been putting aside to pay for May's rent. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And something I have actually been toying with the idea of, so it'd be interesting to see what you think of this, Stuart. I've been wondering about proactively giving my tenants a 10% rent forgiveness. So this would not be a rent holiday like the mortgage holidays, which just rolls up and has to be paid later. This would actually be a forgiveness. This isn't something I can afford to do long term, but for probably a couple of months while we're in sort of the worst bit of this, hopefully the worst bit of it, it's something it won't break me. And I thought it might just be a nice thing to offer. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think it's even enough if I was doing 10%, or do you think I should be a hard landlord and try and get every penny I can?
Well, I think it's a genuinely nice, good idea, and I think there's nothing wrong with trying to put your customers first. I think for me, it's always about survival. So my business at the moment is in survival mode, and I think it sounds like you're in a slightly different position. And I think for me, something that you're doing, just from a business perspective, let alone the human emotive element, is a great thing to do, and will engender, I think, a really positive response from the tenants. The question I have, and I think if it's something you feel like you want to do, I think it's something, why not approach it? The question I always have is, and I've seen this in my portfolio when a couple of the little properties, when the government announced that mortgage holidays would be available, etc., is that there's always going to be some people, a minority, that take advantage of those situations, regardless of their own current situation. So I think it's probably the tenants and their situations, and if you think it will really help them, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, the last month, maybe the tail end of last month or the beginning of April, I proactively sent a mail out to all of my tenants saying, I know these are difficult times, and I know some people may be struggling with finances. If you're going to have any trouble with rent, get in touch, talk to me. I might be able to help work out where the government support is available, or we can work out payment plans and things like that. And all of my tenants did get back to me, and all of them said the things I've mentioned already, actually, that they're in varying situations, but they should be able to pay the rent. If anyone had got back to me and said, I can't pay anything, and I hear there's a mortgage holiday, so of course you should be giving me all my rent for free, then I would probably be feeling less generous to trying to take a bit of a hit myself to help them out. But I think I'm fortunate that all of the tenants I do have at the moment are nice and sort of responsible in taking on their or meeting their commitments and things like that. And
well, it sounds like they are, and it sounds like you've got some really good tenants there, which is always great. And generally, I think it sounds like you've been a really good landlord. I don't know, and getting ahead of it. Personally, I'd think about maybe just following that message up then, and just reaching out to them and just saying, is there anything I can do to help? And if one of them says we are going to struggle to meet the 100% of the rent, then actually you already know that you can help them, and just say, well, look, I'd be happy to help out on this. And because I just think that just the offer of help, I think is, a lot of people, if they are experiencing difficulty, and I've known this from my own situation, is, you're just very grateful that someone's offered, and you might not need it, and you might get through it. I mean, I rent myself at the moment, and, I haven't even considered not paying the rent. It's something, I guess as a husband and father, I see that as my first priority is making sure we've got a roof over our heads. But like you say, I had a tenant who unfortunately, ran into difficulty last year, but has a tendency not to communicate, even though I'd really like to communicate. And I could say this genuinely, and I know the tenant wouldn't be listening to this, but if we had a conversation and the tenant said, Stuart, we're going to struggle and I don't see how I'm going to pay bills for 2 months, I'd say, okay, do you know what? Let's work it out. We'll work it out, and I'll work out a way where we can give you a 2-month break, and we'll work out what happens after that. We'll sit down and communicate, because, and I know it's easy to say on a podcast and when we're just chatting, but I genuinely, want to put people's health and mental well-being first, because who really wants to run a business where you don't give a crap about your customers? Essentially, they're our customers.
Yeah, quite. And the more we can support our customers, our tenants now, then hopefully the better situation they will be in when things start getting back to normal, whether that's just in terms of general mental health or whether it's in terms of being able to start getting back to work and then being willing to keep up with the rent and things and as you say, potentially sort of prioritize that over other things like getting back to going down the pub and going out more and spending money elsewhere.
Yeah, and what I was going to say on that was that, for me, because it is about the communication, and it sounds like you've had a two-way dialogue, which is great. So they've not only have you proactively gone to them, but they have all come back to you, which again surprised me that they've all come back to you. But the tenant,
me too.
But the tenant in question for me did not. This is last year, just didn't respond. Literally went into a shell, wouldn't respond to me, wouldn't respond to the agents, and I was quite clear with the agents. Look, if the tenant's having difficulty, I want to help. But I can't help if I don't know what's going on. So when we hadn't heard anything for, I think, 2 months payments, then I had to say, well, look, we're just going to have to take you're going to have to follow the formal approach. And that's the last thing I want to, it's the last thing any of us want to do as business owners, property investor landlords, because, it takes time, takes effort. No one wants to do that, but it kind of left me in a situation. But that was my frustration, was that, and particularly in these, the COVID time, none of us want to do it. Obviously, the government's decreed that we couldn't anyway. But the point is, actually, if we communicate, stay open, and work together, we'll come out of this, and we'll all, hopefully come out with better relationships.
Yeah, I think people often have a tendency, if they get into new financial problems or whatever, they're not used to that sort of thing. They just sort of put up barriers and want to hide and don't want to admit it, don't they? So I think that can often be a barrier to communication, which is a shame, because it means other people can't then help them.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I do get it. If you're in a difficult situation, you can want to just shut the doors and close the blinds, and I guess we have to acknowledge that. But unfortunately, once you're an adult, you're paying your own bills. We're going to have to face up to things, and particularly when people are proactively reaching out to you. We sent letters just saying, just give us a call. We're here to help. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's a very common thing, even outside of COVID times, as you said, and outside of sort of paying rent specifically. Whenever anyone's in sort of financial difficulty. I mean, actually, I suppose perhaps more widely than that, when people have other concerns, I know addictions and things like that as well, it's often very difficult for someone to admit that they need help. And I think the same is true with financial problems. It's very difficult to admit that you might need help, because it's I think probably the concern is that people sort of look down on you, and no one really wants to bring that upon themselves, do they?
No.
It's the first step to recovery and getting things sorted out, I think, isn't it? Just admitting these things and accepting and talking to people about them.
It certainly is. It certainly is. You sound like a very good 12-step spiritual advisor there. It's the first step. Admitting is the first step. Yeah,
and I have no inside knowledge or indeed outside knowledge of these things, so I'm making up as I go along. So it's quite good to know that I'm along similar lines as professionals. I was wanting to mention one other slightly more positive thing in my updates, which was that I have been able to get some coding done on PaTMa, and a new feature has rolled out in recent days, which is an extension to the stamp duty calculations. So one of the things PaTMa does is provide buy-to-let profit forecasts. And there's a very simple free calculator for this, and then which is completely open. And then there's the option to sign up for a PaTMa account, where you get some extra features, and you can save specific properties you're considering and things from Rightmove and Zoopla and stuff. And the new feature now supports Scottish and Welsh stamp duty calculations, because helpfully they're different from the English ones, and you can actually in the free calculator, there's an advanced section. You can now choose which country's stamp duty system you want to calculate based on. But on the browser extension and where that feeds through to the prospecting tool, where there's a postcode for the property, the system will automatically detect which country that postcode's in and use the appropriate stamp duty.
Very good.
So I thought I'd slip in a nice little PaTMa advert into this episode.
Well, it's very useful, as I said to you. Useful, as I said to you the other day. It's one of these tools, and you're not paying me yet, but it's great to have these features, and obviously that extension has filled a hole for many a property investor to understand a little bit more about those properties that are online. So good to hear you're still developing.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's I thought that it'd be good to try and double down a bit on things during this time. Some of the areas where my time would otherwise be spent have stopped. Although there have been others, such as homeschooling and generally dealing with extra interruptions whilst homeworking, that have taken some time and concentration away. I've been trying to get a bit more forward motion in developments and improvements and things that have been on my list for a while. So there's some more good ones that should be coming in the next few weeks as well, but I'll save those for other episodes. One other relatively positive, although of course it starts with a slight negative, thing I was wondering we might bring in, if you don't mind, Stuart, was your recent medical experiences, because you or your family had some very, very difficult things to deal with in the last few weeks, but you had some good experiences from that.
Yeah, definitely. So it was last week, Wednesday night. My one of my daughters, I've got twin daughters, one of them had a pain, and she'd given up chocolate for Lent. So we, as any sort of really empathetic parent did, said, well, it's probably just because you started eating chocolate again. Just, you'll be fine. Get to bed. And she woke up the next morning. Pain was even greater. So, and she showed us where the pain was, and it looked worryingly sort of where the appendix is. And both my wife and I looked at each other. We didn't say anything. We just said, okay, let's just contact the GP. Essentially, GP did a FaceTime, did all of his examination over whatever the version of FaceTime is for the NHS, and literally confirmed it and said, like, she needs to go to A&E, I'm afraid, like now. And my wife took her to A&E and just said it was, really, really well run. Segmented everyone, obviously, from anyone with a high temperature or A&E sort of coronavirus symptoms was very much separate, used a different entrance. And long story short is that night at 9 p.m. they operated on her and removed her appendix, and it was quite a nasty one, apparently, they said, and we've seen the photos, didn't look great. Of course, as parents, the last place we wanted, one of our children was to be in hospital because of the chance of getting these things. But they then let her go the next day. She's still in recovery, but recovered really, really well. But the experience, as you said, was just truly great. In terms of how the doctor handled it online and over sort of FaceTime, and talking her through things, and just how the doctors handled the whole situation in the hospital. My wife said was truly outstanding. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to wax lyrical and share my gratitude quite openly about it, because of just how the NHS, and more so the people in it, are really putting themselves forward every single day just to ensure our well-being, really. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, when you mentioned that to me the other day, I thought it was really good to hear how the hospital has been adapting their processes and making things still work for everyone who needs medical attention, really. So it was good, and of course, very pleased to hear your daughter's recovering well at the moment.
Thanks. As I said to you, she's so well. She started moaning again, so we know she's improving.
Has she started eating chocolate again?
I don't think that's happened yet. I don't think we've been that nice. I think no, she's still in recovery. No, she's in bed for a couple of days, but she's been up and about now. So yeah, I'm sure.
So you haven't tried to to link chocolate to causing appendicitis.
Evil man.
A sugar-free diet for the rest of our life. Right?
We hadn't considered that, Simon, but clearly we're not as evil. Yeah.
Dear. I have to get my eldest in to do another cameo. He's good with evil laughs.
Okay, yeah,
I'm not quite as good at
that.
I don't know. We should probably bring this to an end. We're at our sort of normal episode length. Unless there's anything else you particularly like to bring up for today, Stuart.
No, I think you're right. I think we've hit the sweet spot of our timing. So yeah, I mean, if you wanted me to just finish off, just for anyone that is listening, if you've listened this far, you're obviously enjoying the show. So please do leave a rating, or if you're feeling inclined, a review. It really helps us just to get the message of business of property out there, and we'd be very grateful if you could do that. And as we always say, the show notes for the show are on thebusinessofproperty.com.